Hello, guys. I welcome you um, once again to our history virtual lessons. And before we begin with our lessons for today, I would urge you to subscribe, share the channel with your friends in other schools. In our previous discussion, we looked at the 1925 Constitution, which was actually promulgated by Governor Gordon Gachisbeck, and we saw a little improvement in that constitution. And even though those improvements were not satisfactory as we had wanted it to be, it was quite better off than the 1916 Constitution of Clifford. And so today we are going to look at the 1946 Constitution, which was also promulgated by another governor known as Allan. And this constitution was actually an improvement on the 1925 Constitution of Gordon Gachisbeck. And so the things that probably the educated elite at this time were agitating for might be included in this new constitution that Allan is going to promulgate. So let's begin, of course, the lesson. As we have there, our subtopic will be Allan Constitution of 1946. So let's look at our lesson objectives for the Allan Constitution, and then we can actually continue with our lessons. So our lesson objectives for today is that by the end of the lesson, you should be able to discuss the features of the Barnes Constitution of 1946 and also outline the strength or the merit or the advantage of the Barnes Constitution. What do you find good, improved on the Barnes Constitution? Then you state the limitations or weaknesses or disadvantages of the Barnes Constitution, and that is what we still are not satisfied as a people. What the educated elite were still not satisfied. You look at some of the weaknesses as well. So let's begin with our lesson for today. So let's start with the introduction. Now, the Allan who was Allan Barnes? I mean, Allan Barnes was a governor of the Gold Coast, and he actually ruled from 1942 to 1947. And actually, the constitution, or his constitution that he promulgated, was actually done in March 1946, and this was after the Second World War, or the World War II. And the World War II had come with so many changes, because after the war there was so much hardship in the colonies, and even after the war, the mindset of the educated elite, who were actually agitating for certain reforms and all of that, had changed. Now the educated elite, or the nationalists, were demanding for self-rule. They were demanding for self-determination, the right for them to determine or to govern themselves. And so the Second World War had come with so many changes in the political space in the colony, and therefore Barnes, of course, was supposed to make some changes or some reforms on the 1925 Constitution to reflect the aspirations of the nationalists. So we are saying that it was promulgated at the back of fierce protest and also agitation and other forms of pressure, which were actually aimed towards a greater participation of Africans in all aspects of the governance processes in the colonial government. So, like I'm saying, now the mindset had changed, and so the educated elite actually wanted to have majority, of course, representation in governance, and unlike the the first one around before the First World War, when they were only agitating for reforms. Now they were demanding for active participation in the colonial governance process. So let's look at some of the changes that Barnes made in that constitution, and then we can see what to do. So let's look at the features of the Barnes constitution. Let's begin with the features. Let's begin with the, of course, Legislative Council, as we do always. And so we are saying that for the first time, the Constitution made provision of African majority in the Legislative Council, which was very, very, very good, because this is the first time that Africans were going to have a majority on the Legislative Council, because we had seen in the 1925 Constitution where Africans were still in the minority, which they had about 14 unofficial members or so. And so with this one, Africans were going to have majority, or they were going to be majority, more members in the Legislative Council. Therefore means that decisions are really going to be taken, issues are going to be discussed by Africans themselves, or the Ghanaians, of course, themselves, or the Gold Coasters at this time themselves. Again, the Constitution also provided for the legislative union between the colony and also the Asante, which then included Bro and Ahafo region. We had earlier on seen in all the Constitution from 1903 up to 1925, that's the Gadgetberg Constitution, that Asante, the Northern Territories, and the mandated British Togoland actually had not been part of the colony or the Constitution. These areas had no representation, and since we have, or the educated elite have been complaining of a greater involvement of these colonies or these territories into the colony, we had earlier on established that they were ruled separately from the Gold Coast, and that was not the right way to go. So Barnes, of course, at this time in 1946, because the people were demanding for greater participation, he actually decided to now, of course, include the colony of Asante, which then also had Bro and Ahafo part of it into the colony. So now we will have Asante added to the Gold Coast, and that is what the Constitution will cover. We still don't have the Northern Territories and the British mandated Togoland also still still being left out. Let's look at the composition of the Legislative Council, even though we have already stated that Africans are now the majority on this Legislative Council. Now the governor acted as a president on the Legislative Council, which is not surprising, because that's what we have seen in all the in all the constitutions that we have looked at. Now 6 officials, of course, and then 24 unofficial members, and definitely the 6 officials members may be Europeans, while the 24 unofficial members are going to be Africans. And that is why we say that the 1946 Constitution was the first constitution that gave the African majority, okay, on the Legislative Council, because the Africans were going to have 24 unofficial members, whereas the Europeans will have only 6 official members. So let's look at the breakdown of the African members. Before that, let's look at this before I move on to show you the diagram for it. So, of course, 24 unofficial members. Out of the 24 unofficial members, we were going to have 9 who were going to be, of course, elected by the Joint Provincial Council of Chiefs. Don't forget that this Joint Provincial Council of Chiefs, or the Council of Chiefs, had been established by the 1925 Constitution of Gadgetberg in order to allow the indirect rule system to operate. And so 9 members were given to the chiefs, or the Joint Provincial Council of Chiefs. And this was not different from the 1925 Constitution, because in the Gadgetberg Constitution also 9 reps or 9 members were also, or 9 representation were also given to the chiefs. And so that should tell you how important the British colonial authorities saw the chiefs or placed on the chiefs. They were still taking actively or participating actively in their governance system, of course, at the expense of the educated elite. And we know that the educated elite are not going to be happy about this. Now, 4 of 4 by the Asante-Man Council. So out of the 9 chiefs, 4 will be from the Asante-Man Council, and then 5 will be 4 will be now the Asante-Man Council will also, of course, have 4 representations. So Asante alone would have 4 representations. Now 5 will now be directly elected by the universal adult suffrage from the municipalities of Accra, who would have 2 members, and then Cape Coast and Sekondi, and as well as Kumasi, who have 1, and each. So 6 members nominated by the governor, of whom 3 were also, of course, Europeans, of course, representing the 3 special interests: the mining, the banking, and other, of course, commercial areas. Let's look at the breakdown of the diagram so that we don't get confused. So 30 officials in the 30 members, in the Legislative Assembly, including the official. Are you okay? Yes. Including the governor, not the official, but the governor, and of course making them 30. Now let's take a look at the official members will be 6, and then the unofficial members will be what? Will be 24. All right, and then out of that 24, we will have, or we should have, the 9 being elected by the Joint Provincial Council of Chiefs. And then we should also have 4 being elected by the Asante-Man Council, and then we should also have 5 being elected through the universal adult suffrage. And this universal adult suffrage was quite different from the 1925 Constitution, even though it was the 1925 Constitution that actually gave the first elective principle, but that was limited because it was only limited based on property franchise. But now it is going to be a universal adult suffrage. That is, anybody who is at an adult age was, of course, qualified to vote, and they were to represent Accra, Kumasi, Takrady, Cape Coast, and co. And then we should also have 6 of these unofficial members who were also again going to be nominated by the governor. And they were 3 of them were supposed to be Europeans, and these Europeans were going to represent the special interest. That is the thing that the Europeans actually, or the British governor actually, was interested in, And then 3 of these nominated members are going to be also Gold Coasted. And so this is just a diagram representation of the 1946 Constitution, and it's not different. If you look at the composition of the council, it's not all that different from that of the 1925 Constitution of Gagensberg. The same 29, almost 29, 30. Also, the chiefs also had the same. The Joint Provincial Chiefs also had the same, of course, representation. The only difference that we can make from this and the 1925 Constitution was that Asante had the representation, unlike the 1925, where Asante did not have a representation, and more so probably Asante. I think, of course, those are the only little difference that we can make of this Constitution. Not much. So let's look at the features. Let's go to the Executive Council as well, as we have it. Executive Council. So the Executive Council also were supposed to comprise of 11 members, 8 officials and 3 nominated unofficials. But take a look at the 1925 Constitution. It was only 5 British officials. That's 5 officials and the governor. So making the Executive Council 6. But now here we have improved on that. Now we have 11 members, from 6 to 11, and we are going to have 8 officials and 3 unofficial which were nominated, and the governor, as usual, was responsible for the they were all responsible to the governor, and so it means that the governor was again the chair of this constitution. Now, the three Ghanaians who were actually nominated to take part or to be part of the Executive Council was C, of course, W. Techima Mason, who was from Second municipality. We also have Dr. I.B. Asafo Ejay, who was also from the Asante, and Nana Chebo Dakun also would, of course, represent the Western province. And so we find out that, the first time we have seen a Ghanaian representation or an African representation in the Executive Council for the first time, and this could be a strength, or could be one of the strengths of the 1946 Constitution, because in 1925 there wasn't any Ghanaian, of course, representation, and this is what the educated elite and the nationalists have been agitating for. But of course, for the first time, we have three members or three Ghanaian representation on the Executive Council. But however, Ghanaian representation or the African representation was in the minority. The Europeans still maintained the majority on the Legislative Council. Good. If you have any question, you can just WhatsApp me, or you can just, of course, call me 05420830047, or of course, better still, you comment on the section, and I would respond. Now let's look at the merit. We have already talked about, of course, some of them in my analysis, in my discussion. And so we are saying that the Banks Constitution, for the first time in the political history of the country, introduced unofficial majority in the Legislative Council. So Africans became the majority for the first time, and you agree with that? Is that not it? Yes. Now again, the municipalities of Accra, Cape Coast, and Second were also, of course, represented. Asante also got a representation on the council. That's integrating the colony and Asante for the first time. And so Asante also getting representation on the council, of course, for the first time. It's also a good step in the right, of course, direction. Now let's look at the next one. Now, the concept of the Joint Provincial Council also provided the opportunity for the chiefs to succinctly express their grievance against the colonial administration, especially in chieftaincy issues. So you realize that the chiefs were actually having more majority, 9, as opposed to the educated elite. And that actually gave the chiefs that voice, because they had quite a number of representation on the council. So that also gave them the voice to also express their grievance at the colonial, of course, governor. You can add or think through and then add some of the merit of the 1946, of course, Constitution. You can think through. But of course, this is what I can have for you. So let's look at the weaknesses of the Constitution. Let's look at the weaknesses of the Constitution. So we said that, of course, the Executive Council also still continue to have official members. It implied that real power was vested in the hands of the colonial governor as well as the Executive Council. So as I told you earlier, the Executive Council was still composed of Europeans or the British, which really the Africans had no power, and that was the highest organ of government, and that, yeah. And then two, apart from the municipalities of Accra, Cape Coast, and Second, the educated elite were reduced to spectators, as they almost had no say in the administration of the country. So if you look at the composition of the Legislative Council, you realize that the educated elite were only representing these areas, and apart from being or representing these areas, they almost had no say. They were reduced to minority in the council, and the chiefs were rather, of course, given the majority of the representation. Now, and so the Banks Constitution actually failed also to meet the changes, of course, that were brought up by the Second World War, you understand? And for this reason, the Boston Commission described it as outmoded at best. And so we earlier on in our introduction established that the World War brought so many changes in the colony, in the political, in economic space, in almost every aspect of the life of the African. It came with so many hardship and so many disturbances, and these hardship, of course, like further escalated, and it led to a whole lot of violence in the colony. And so a Western Commission, after the 1948 rout or disturbances, was actually integrated to look into the causes of the disturbance. And actually one of the causes that they found out was as a result of the Banks Constitution, which actually the people were not in support. As you can see, it is still not what the educated elite were expecting. And so the Western Commission actually, of course, described the Banks Constitution as outmoded, out of bed. Even before it came to pass, it was outmoded already. And the last one, again, we find out that the territories of the Transvolta Togoland is still not there. The Northern Territories, the British mandated Togoland, that's the Transvolta Togoland, were also had no representation in the Legislative Council. And that's still a problem. Until that is done, the whole colony or the whole Ghana that we have today will not seem to be proper. Yes, so with this, I guess we have something for you that you can just try your hands on. And so, yeah, with this, I guess you are okay and you are good. If you are asked any question about the Banks Constitution, you will be able to do that with ease. Thank you very much, and subscribe to the page, share, and we will meet once again. Thank you and bye-bye.